Firstly, this has happened in 50 towns. So 5 local inquiries is going to potentially give partial answers to 5 of those towns, but what about the other 45? Secondly, local inquiries have no statutory basis, which means they can't compel witnesses and they can't compel evidence. So of course, if you are a councillor or a council official who's been complicit in these horrible crimes and you can't be compelled to go to an inquiry, you're not going to go.
What a surprise, yeah.
Yeah. Unbelievable. And
what happens when a voice built for shouting meets a question that demands silence? Jess Phillips entered Parliament like she always does, ready to control the room with volume and bravado, but this time she ran into Katie Lamb. No theatrics, no raised voice, just razor-sharp questions delivered with surgical calm. What followed wasn't a debate, it was a dismantling. Piece by piece, Jess unraveled in real time, caught off guard by questions she couldn't bulldoze, only stumble through. It wasn't just awkward, it was painful, like watching a lion forget how to roar. So what exactly did Katie ask that flipped the script so fast? Brace yourself, this one's hard to watch.
the men who preyed on them were predominantly Muslim, generally either from Pakistan or of Pakistani heritage. One of the victims from Dewsbury was told by her rapist, I quote, "We're here to all the white girls, the government." Will the minister accept that, in many cases, these crimes were racially and religiously aggravated?
Before we dive in, smash that like button and hit subscribe, because trust me, you do not want to miss what's coming next. Ever witnessed someone try to sound clever, only to end up mentally body slamming themselves in front of an audience? Enter Jess Phillips, Labour MP, self-appointed opinion machine, delivering what can only be described as a masterclass in unintentional comedy right in the heart of Parliament. He's stage, a room meant for serious political discourse. The outcome? A live improv sketch with unexpected punchlines and a plot twist absolutely no one saw coming. And yes, it all began like most political mishaps do, with a moment that seemed harmless.
Failure to announce a meaningful national statutory inquiry means women and girls from across the country who won't be from those 5 selected towns will be denied justice, a fair hearing. And if the victims want a national statutory inquiry, why doesn't she?
I have spent time with the victims that he speaks about. In fact, I will be going to see some more of the victims from around the country. I speak to these victims every single week.
Katie Lamb steps up, cool as a cucumber marinated in cold, hard facts. She drops a question, not just any question, a clean, sharp, logically built missile aimed straight at the heart of accountability. The kind of question that demands clarity, maybe even sparks a real answer for once. But that would have required coherence. What followed instead was a verbal car crash in slow motion.
When people like Tommy Robinson go out and talk about these cases, they make it less likely people will be convicted. Justice is complicated. Keeping people safe isn't just saying the hardest thing, it is a complex fabric. And when you're not hearing things you think are happening, half of them won't be happening, and believe you me, I've seen behind the curtain. Cock up is much more likely than conspiracy.
Ah yes, the gladiators of the Westminster Coliseum, ready to clash, not with swords, but with sound bites. On one side, Jess Phillips, Labour MP, and the living embodiment of I have the floor and I will use every last second of it. She's known for being outspoken. Translation, she talks first, thinks somewhere down the line, and if there's a microphone within arm's reach, consider it under siege. Meanwhile, her opponent stands quietly, scalpel in hand, precision over volume. The stage is set, and things are about to get messy.
It's all right. The election that I have...
Gerard, this will be a warning. I will be asking people, or asking people to leave, unless we get this completed.
I will carry on with my speech. I understand that a strong woman standing up to you is met with such reticence. Anyway, this election has been... Can you throw them out?
Jess Phillips, known for fiery speeches, constant media FaceTime, and a knack for approaching nuance with the subtlety of a marching band. She's the political equivalent of a daytime talk show, never quite reaching a conclusion, but always making noise. Then there's Katie Lamb, the calm in the storm, a newer face in Parliament, but already a presence. No theatrics, no shouting, no flailing paperwork like she's conducting a fire drill. Where Jess barrels through the room with conviction, Katie walks in like a still lake, silent but deep. And here's the irony, Jess Phillips has built her career on advocating against violence towards women and girls. Now she's the safeguarding minister. You'd think in that role she'd be all over the industrial scale abuse of young, working class girls across the country. But instead, silence. Or worse, strategic redirection. Katie calls it out, not with rage, but with precision. She doesn't attack, she asks. Carefully worded, seemingly harmless questions designed to do one thing, make her opponents unravel themselves. She's got that deadly quiet energy, the kind that makes you sweat before a word is even spoken. You know that calm, chilling teacher tone when you get caught cheating, and they just smile and say, "Want to explain this?" Yeah, Katie Lamb is that, except she's got a law degree and parliamentary immunity. When she speaks, she's not performing, she's setting traps. Questions shaped like open doors, step through carelessly, and suddenly you're stumbling face first into your own contradictions. She's the political version of a librarian who calmly asks one question and makes you question your life, your choices, and maybe whether retail wasn't such a bad path after all. Her power, it's in the pause, that stillness, that I'm listening expression that somehow makes you start spiraling. And Jess Phillips, with all her megaphone energy and bullet point passion, never stood a chance. So, why does this moment actually matter?
Nothing was done previously to try and get to the truth in some of these towns, and we will absolutely do whatever we can to root out, as everybody in this house wants to see, while some of us wish to use it for political ends, an end to this particular crisis. We will be opening, we have offered to open up cases and have set the task force to do exactly that with any...
Because this wasn't just some awkward back and forth between two MPs caught on C-SPAN. This was a collision, a full-speed live-action crash between two completely different political worlds. Imagine a TED Talk and a reality show being forced to co-host Question Time. That's what this was. On one side, the emotionally charged, TikTok-ready style of politics, where passion trumps precision and saying something loud matters more than saying something that makes sense. On the other, calm, cold, fact-based interrogation. No fluff, no detours, no tolerance for dancing around the point. Jess brought feelings, Katie brought footnotes. And when those two worlds collided, it wasn't just a question being asked. It was a quiet referendum on the state of political discourse. It exposed just how thin the armor is when a politician built on sound bites gets hit with substance. It showed how often we let volume substitute for value, how the loudest voice in the room is sometimes just the best at hiding how little they actually know. This wasn't just about Katie Lamb and Jess Phillips. It was about us. Every person who's ever sat watching, shouting at the screen, just answer the question. And for once, someone did. No, it's
in opposition that I would be tearing my hair out. You know, like you on reading that, I am aghast. I have heard that for 20 years. I suspect I'll hear it again in 20 years' time, unless we truly act. So yes, you're absolutely right to be flabbergasted by that sentence ever being said anymore. And so what I have to do as a government minister, and what the government has to do as part of its mission to halve violence against women and girls, is look at every single one of those entry points. There has to be actions taken to prevent. Now, I'm not idealistic enough to think that overnight I could change this and make everything brilliant and rosy, but we have to do the work on the entry points and learn lessons rather than just saying we've learned.
Phillips walked into that exchange expecting the usual applause for her passion and a round of nods for her indignation. Instead, she met a brick wall named Katie Lamb, who didn't care about vibes. She wanted clarity. Lamb didn't interrupt. She didn't yell. She just waited. And the longer she waited, the more Jess filled the silence with vague ramblings and policy dodgeball. It was like watching someone try to defuse a bomb using IKEA instructions and a teaspoon. tone. And therein lies the brilliance, because in this exchange, the stakes weren't just about the topic at hand. It was about credibility, competence, and battle between performance and precision. In British politics, Jess represented the old school, loud, confident, but often light on substance. Katie brought in the new wave, strategic, surgical, and not interested in noise without knowledge. This wasn't just a clash, it was a quiet reckoning. And Jess Phillips, she brought a megaphone to a chess match. Now Jess Phillips is no stranger to talking. In fact, some say she treats every parliamentary session like an open mic night. So naturally, she leapt to her feet, armed with all the confidence of someone who once read the headline of a policy document. What followed was less an answer and more a scatter plot of buzzwords, emotional deflections, and vaguely threatening hand gestures.
Now being led by ministers rather than by independent voices such as Tom Crowther. Why is the £5 million set aside for inquiries no longer being allocated but instead delivered on an opt-in basis? And what does the government intend to do about local leaders who say there is no need for an independent inquiry, like in Bradford or in Wales? The girls we are talking about, Mr. Speaker, are predominantly white. The men who preyed on them were predominantly Muslim, generally either from Pakistan or of Pakistani heritage. One of the victims from Dewsbury was told by her rapist, I quote, "We're here to all the white girls and fuck the government." Will the minister accept that, in many cases, these crimes were racially and religiously aggravated?
She started strong, if by strong you mean loud, but it didn't take long for the tone to shift dramatically. What followed was the political equivalent of a cat puffing itself up to intimidate a laser pointer. Rather than directly answering the question, she veered off into a maze of verbal detours, each one more baffling than the last. At least 3 unrelated anecdotes, 2 hypothetical what-ifs, and something that might have been a reference to a TV show, though who could tell? At one point, it was like watching her lose control of her own words, like a GPS recalculating in real time. The sentence tumbled out in a chaotic stream, as if a political bingo machine had spun wildly, spitting out jargon with no rhyme or reason. You couldn't help but check your ears, wondering if your hearing had malfunctioned, because it sure seemed like the logic had. Katie Lamb, on the other hand, sat there, an image of calm restraint, like a therapist or a hostage negotiator waiting for the storm to pass. She didn't interrupt, didn't roll her eyes, she just watched as the train wreck unfolded in front of her. You could almost see her weighing whether to offer Phillips a glass of water, or perhaps a roadmap to help her find her way back to reality. But the longer it went on, the clearer it became. Phillips had no plan, no strategy, just noise and volume. And as the seconds dragged on into an agonizing eternity, her argument slowly imploded, collapsing in on itself like a souffle caught in a wind tunnel.
Membership of a grooming gang, an aggravating factor during sentencing, so that offenders get the longer, harsher sentences they deserve. Will the minister commit today to adopting these amendments to protect our children? Finally, I would like to read to the House one particular ordeal, just one example of what these children have suffered. I must warn colleagues, and especially those in the gallery, that this is extremely graphic, but we must not look away or sanitise this evil. Sentencing Mohammed Karar of Oxford to life in prison, Judge Peter Rook said, "You prepared your victim, a 13-year-old girl, for gang anal rape by using a pump to expand her..."
She tried to pivot, then spin, then completely ditch any semblance of logic in favor of an emotional plea. Meanwhile, her brain seemed to hit the snooze button mid-sentence. The chamber, usually alive with the buzz of performative outrage or dramatic applause, fell into an eerie, deafening silence. You could almost hear the collective cringe ripple through the back benches. Even her own party members looked like they were mentally drafting excuses to suddenly be somewhere else. And then came Katie Lamb's response. No raised voice, no dramatic flair, just a quiet, measured reminder of the original question and a gentle nudge back toward reality. If Phillips had come to win an argument, she instead walked away with a starring role in a public cell phone. Lamb's words cut through the nonsense like a hot knife slicing through overcooked policy.
Instead of that £5 million for 5 judge-led local inquiries, the government says it's now going to take a flexible approach, which is code for sweep it under the carpet. They're now offering councils alternative options, such as local panels and audits. Why won't this work? Well, I'll tell you why this won't work. It won't work because it was local government, local police, local authorities, local care home staff, local social workers who allowed this to happen in the first place. They watched as this happened again and again and again to thousands of young girls. And why did...
And the internet? Oh, the internet feasted. Clips of the exchange hit social media faster than seagulls swooping in on dropped chips. Twitter quickly morphed into a battlefield of savage satire, while TikTok wasted no time, with remixes of the moment set to comical clown music flooding in. One viral video paired Phillips's rambling with a malfunctioning GPS, its voice repeatedly recalculating every 5 seconds. Recalculating over and over. Memes exploded like weeds after a storm, flooding timelines with one-liners. That's a TED Talk on how not to answer a question. Another meme added, and let's not forget Facebook, where boomers, armed with a passion for clip art, jumped in. One post had Phillips's face with a speech bubble that read, "I'm not lost, I'm just exploring alternative realities." But beyond the mockery, the moment stood as a cautionary tale. What happens when style tries to moonwalk past substance? Phillips didn't just fail to answer a question, she became a masterclass in how not to win a debate.
Has the Labour Party betrayed the Pakistani rape gang victims and survivors in the most sinister way? GB News' Charlie Peters revealed that rape gangs had operated in at least 50 towns right across the country. When Labour lost control of Oldham Council, councillors requested a full inquiry into the grooming gang scandal so they could out everyone who was complicit in it and a subsequent alleged cover-up. This letter from Jess Phillips was leaked refusing that inquiry, which then sparked quite a bit of outrage.
There were the usual deflections, claims of being taken out of context, calls to focus on the real issues, and the classic fallback of blaming the media for cherry picking. But the damage, it was done. And that cherry wasn't picked, it was set on fire. Commentators everywhere took notice, and even those who typically sympathized with Phillips couldn't deny it was a rough showing. One columnist called it a masterclass in saying everything and answering nothing. Another summed it up as performance politics without the performance. Meanwhile, Katie Lamb, she carried on like nothing had happened, probably sipping tea and filing papers, while trending online for dismantling Phillips without raising her voice above room temperature. And here's the real kicker. Lamb didn't win the exchange because she was louder or flashier. She won because she actually made sense.
Ever going to define myself by the name of a man in the Labour Party?
What, you mean even if it was a man that won you 3 elections?
There's some... I am literally in love with some of the things that Tony Blair did for my family. But what I would say is that I like every single thing that Angela Rayner said today. I want it. I see the problem.
As for Phillips, well, next time someone asks a question in Parliament, maybe she'll bring an answer instead of an interpretive dance of confusion. Or at least a map, a thesaurus, or better yet, a moment of silence to reconsider every decision that led to this debacle. So yes, Jess Phillips was humiliated. Not by a vicious attack, but by her own inability to connect dots that were already numbered. She showed up to a battle of wits armed with a glitter cannon and no ammo, while Katie Lamb, she just stood there, calmly letting gravity do the heavy lifting. It was a masterclass in composure, clarity, and what happens when a political performance goes wildly off script.
There is violence against women and girls that you are describing. A very similar situation to what happened in Cologne could be described on Broad Street in Birmingham every week, where women are baited and heckled.
It's a lesson in how style simply cannot replace substance. Jess Phillips didn't just fumble a question, she exposed the emptiness that often lurks behind performative politics. You can bring passion, flair, and the whole woman of the people energy, but if you can't actually answer a basic policy question, it all crumbles, like a stale digestive biscuit under pressure. This is what happens when political theater forgets it's supposed to have a script. Performative politicians rely on energy, applause lines, and the assumption that no one will press pause long enough to spot the cracks. But when someone like Katie Lamb shows up, armed not with a catchy slogan, but with specifics, that entire act falls apart. Suddenly, the drama stops looking like leadership.
This is not about me. It is not about the Minister or the Home Secretary or any of us in this chamber. It is about them. Little girls up and down our country whose brutal and repeated rapes were permitted and hidden by those in the British state whose job was to protect them. They deserve justice. In 5 towns, these children and their families may get partial answers. But I have mentioned 5 towns in the last few minutes alone, and there are at least 45 more. In those places, they will get no answers at all. What does the Minister have to say to them? The British people deserve to know the truth. What darker truths does the suffering of these girls reveal about this country? And why won't the government find out?
Minister.
Zero Minister, this wasn't about Labour versus Tory, left versus right, or even one MP beating another. This was about the method of politics, what kind of leadership we're rewarding, and what kind of nonsense we're finally starting to call out for. Once, it wasn't the loudest person who won, it was the one who made sense. And that's the takeaway here. In an age of political theater, Katie Lamb brought a scalpel to a shouting match, and won not with volume, not with drama, but with the kind of quiet precision that exposes how empty the noise really is. And if that doesn't shake up how we view modern politics, it should at least scare every MP who has been coasting on charisma alone in. Let us know your thoughts in the comments section. Like and subscribe to our channel for more updates like this.